Stay tuned. Personally went undercover, quietly stepping into the night shift. But what he uncovered wasn't just shocking, it exposed a dark truth eating away at the company. A mysterious worker, strange after-hours activities, and a secret room no one was ever meant to find. Why was he doing this? What was he hiding? The answer will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Stay tuned, because the final twist will change everything. Gavin Pierce leaned back in his chair, staring at the two reports in front of him. One was from corporate, numbers up, efficiency on track, inventory loss down, the kind of report that should make a CEO relax. The other was from HR, and that one had his attention. It wasn't a formal complaint, not exactly, just a note attached to a larger file, almost like an afterthought. Some supervisors mention odd behavior during night shifts. One employee, Mateo Cruz, reportedly stays late every night. No misconduct, just unusual. Unusual. Gavin hated vague language like that. He'd seen it before. Vague meant ignored. Vague meant something was happening under the surface and no one wanted to dig. He read on. Mateo wasn't a problem. In fact, his productivity was off the charts. Fast, consistent, zero errors, never late, never called out sick. If anything, he was too perfect. But something didn't sit right. Why did someone with numbers that clean also show up in a rising stack of quiet, subtle complaints? Not about him necessarily, just things that seemed to swirl around him. A late-night noise here, a reorganized shelf no one claimed. Safety signs moved. Cameras catching motion long after the shift was over. Gavin's gut tightened. He'd built his company with his own hands back when the team could fit around a fold-out table, and late nights meant shared pizza and loading trucks in the rain. Now there were hundreds of employees, 5 distribution centers, and regional directors who sent him polished updates with smiley charts and sterile language. But numbers didn't lie, and neither did his instincts. He opened his drawer and pulled out a file marked Temp Onboarding. The last time he used it was 2 years ago when he first went undercover to investigate a warehouse manager accused of mistreating single mothers on his team. That experience changed policies, changed the company. Maybe it was time again. By the end of the day, Gavin had cleared his schedule, called in a favor with a staffing agency, and created a fake identity. Daniel Hayes, a new temp worker looking to make ends meet. The kind of guy no one looked at twice. The kind of guy who blended into a warehouse floor without anyone asking questions. That night, in the mirror, Gavin looked different. Hoodie, work boots, faded jeans. He let the stubble grow in and pulled a cap low over his forehead. His eyes, normally sharp with boardroom confidence, looked softer now, uncertain, curious. He didn't know what he was walking into, but he knew this much. Something wasn't adding up, and if there was more to Mateo Cruz than what the report said, he was going to find out, even if it meant becoming invisible again. The first thing Gavin noticed about the night shift was how quiet everything felt, and not in a peaceful way. There was a hum in the warehouse, the kind of mechanical rhythm that never really stopped. Conveyor belts clicked, scanners beeped, and forklifts growled as they moved along polished concrete paths. But underneath all that, there was a stillness, a kind of cold routine. No music, no chatter, just people moving like clockwork. Heads down, eyes tired. It was 6:02 p.m. when Daniel Hayes stepped onto the floor. No welcome, no handshake, just a clipboard shoved into his hands and a brief nod from the night manager. A tall man with a shaved head named Derek. Zone 3, Derek muttered, barely looking at him. You'll be shadowing Mateo. He's over by receiving. That name hit hard, but Gavin kept his expression neutral. He followed the layout on the clipboard through rows of towering shelves, past pallets of sealed boxes and yellow-striped caution zones, until he spotted someone already deep in motion, sliding a crate into position with almost mechanical precision. Mateo Cruz. He looked younger than Gavin expected. Mid-20-esque, maybe? Lean frame, sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark hair pulled back loosely. His safety vest hung slightly off his shoulder. and there was a quiet intensity in his movement. No wasted steps, no hesitation. Gavin approached slowly. "Hey, Derek said I should find you. I'm Daniel, new guy." Matteo glanced over his shoulder, gave a nod, and pointed to an empty pallet. "You ever worked outbound before?" "Not really," Gavin lied. "Cool, I'll show you." And that was it. No small talk, no curiosity, just straight into work. Matteo moved fast but not sloppy. He explained everything as he went, how to scan barcodes and batches, how to check for damaged labels, how to stack heavier boxes low and distribute the weight for loading. He never raised his voice, never stumbled over a word, but what stood out most wasn't how he worked. It was how everyone else treated him. Some nodded when he passed, but no one lingered, no one joked with him. No one called him by name, so it was like he existed in a separate layer of the warehouse, seen but never really noticed. Later that night, during the 15-minute break, most of the workers gathered near the vending machines and folding tables by the dock. Gavin sat on a crate nearby, pretending to scroll his phone while keeping Matteo in the corner of his eye. Matteo didn't sit. He walked behind the storage aisle, quietly picking up wrappers and discarded zip ties that others had left behind. He checked a loose safety cone and repositioned it. Then he crouched to inspect a wheel lock on one of the pallet jacks, something nobody would notice, let alone fix during a break. Gavin stared. This wasn't normal behavior. Matteo wasn't just doing his job. He was doing everything in silence, in the background, when no one was watching. After the break, they got back to work. Matteo didn't speak unless it was about the task at hand, but something in his eyes told Gavin that silence was practiced, like it wasn't shyness, it was protection. By the end of the shift, Gavin's arms ached, his back throbbed. But Matteo, still steady, still moving, when the final shipment was loaded and the others clocked out, Gavin pretended to tie his boot while he watched from behind a column. Matteo didn't leave. He grabbed a flashlight from the equipment rack, walked toward the restricted maintenance hallway, and slipped out of sight. No hesitation, like he did it every night. The most revealing things don't happen during the workday. They happen when everyone else goes home. Gavin waited by the time clock, pretending to mess with the laces on his boot, his eyes flicking between the side exit and the hallway where Matteo had disappeared. One by one, the rest of the night shift left, laughing softly, tapping out with tired faces, a few grumbling about traffic. But Matteo didn't come back, not right away, and Gavin knew deep down he wouldn't. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The warehouse was nearly silent now, the hum of machinery fading as lights clicked off zone by zone. The air felt heavier, more honest. It was like the building was finally breathing without all the noise. Gavin moved. He followed the hallway Matteo had taken, stepping quietly past the safety cones and locked janitor closets. This section of the warehouse was older, a bit forgotten. Paint chipped along the corners, a leaky faucet dripped in rhythm. There were no cameras here. He'd made sure of that when reviewing the floor plan days earlier. It was a dead zone, and that's where he found him. Matteo was in a small, half-lit utility space, maybe 10 feet wide. It looked like an old supply room, barely used. Dust lined the walls. In the center, Matteo knelt next to a busted pallet jack, tools spread around him. A flashlight stood upright in a plastic cup, casting long shadows across the room. He was working quietly, focused, hands steady. Gavin stayed out of sight, heart thudding. This wasn't part of his job. No one had asked him to do this. No work order, no repair ticket. And yet here he was, on his own time, fixing company equipment by hand like it was second nature. Matteo adjusted a bolt, tested the wheel, tightened it again. Then he stood, wiped the sweat from his brow and looked around. He picked up a rag and wiped down a section of wall, not because it was dirty, but because it bothered him. Then he took a notebook from his back pocket, scribbled something inside it, and tucked it away again. Gavin backed up slowly, slipped behind a row of storage bins, and waited until he heard Matteo leave. By the time he made it outside, Matteo was already gone. No car, no sound, like he'd vanished. Gavin stood in the cold air under the parking lot lights, his breath fogging in front of him. What was this? He couldn't understand it yet. Matteo wasn't staying late for money. There was no overtime on this shift. He wasn't clocked in. He wasn't reporting these repairs to anyone. There was no praise, no incentive, no recognition. And that was the strangest part. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He was just doing it. Gavin sat in his truck for a long time before driving off, his thoughts racing in circles. A man who worked this hard, this quietly, had a reason, something deep, something personal. No one hides effort like that unless they've been ignored before or punished for caring too much. Whatever the reason, Gavin knew one thing. He hadn't just found a good worker. He'd found a mystery. And it was time to dig deeper. Most people show who they are during the day. Matteo revealed himself when no one was watching at all. Gavin arrived early the next evening, hours before his scheduled shift. The sun hadn't even set yet, and the warehouse lot was nearly empty, just a few trucks parked off to the side, an open bay door and the low mechanical hum from inside. He scanned the lot. No sign of Matteo. He walked through the front with a forced yawn and a thermos of gas station coffee, blending in like just another night worker showing up too early. No one questioned him. Good. Zone 3 was still dark. So were the corridors behind it. But as he turned the corner near the maintenance closet, he spotted it. The faint glow of a flashlight under a cracked door. Matteo was already there, earlier than anyone. Again, Gavin didn't move right away. He crouched down quietly and waited, listening. Inside, Matteo was humming softly to himself, barely audible. The sound of metal on metal scraped as he worked on something. A soft grunt, a click, then silence. Gavin shifted closer and peeked through the narrow gap in the door. Matteo sat cross-legged on the floor. A dismantled electrical panel lay open in front of him. He wasn't guessing his way through it. He knew what he was doing. Tools lined up in neat rows beside him. His movements were fluid, precise, like someone who had studied, practiced, done this before. Beside him, taped to the inside of the cabinet door, was a folded piece of paper. Gavin squinted. It wasn't a work order or wiring diagram. It was a checklist, handwritten, neat. Replace fuses, done. Clean contact points, done. Test panel voltage, TBD. Label wires again, do not skip. Each line was marked with dates. Gavin saw 2 weeks' worth of tiny daily updates. Matteo had been doing this for days, and no one knew. Gavin stepped back, stunned. He'd expected effort, maybe even quiet dedication, but this was organized, consistent, intentional. Matteo wasn't just fixing things in secret. He was maintaining an entire part of the warehouse system by himself, off the clock, without recognition. That question sat heavy in Gavin's chest as he slipped back into the main floor, pretending to check some incoming pallets as others started arriving for the shift. Derek gave a brief nod, clipboard already in hand, barking instructions without making eye contact. Matteo arrived minutes later, sweat already on his brow. Gavin watched him grab his scanner like nothing had happened. No one said a word. No one noticed, or maybe they did and just didn't care. Ikta disappeared. He thought the landscape disappeared. They're inside, Frosted filtered, went under Zone 2. It let out a metallic screech before the engine choked and died. The operator hopped off and shook his head. Piece of junk's been doing that for weeks. Derek waved it off. Tag it and leave it. Maintenance will get to it next week. But Matteo was already walking over. He crouched, peeked underneath, tapped twice on the side of the engine cover, then pulled a tool from his vest pocket. Within minutes, he had the panel open and was adjusting something deep inside. Gavin stood nearby, pretending to reorganize a box, watching. Matteo closed the panel, tried the ignition. It worked. The operator blinked. What the hell? Matteo just nodded and walked back to his station. No credit, no thanks, just back to work. Gavin felt something stir in his chest. It wasn't just admiration, it was disbelief. Matteo wasn't waiting for permission to make things better. He was already doing it. and no one knew. Some people work for a paycheck, others work like they're protecting something. Gavin couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the way Matteo moved, the calm confidence in how he fixed that forklift, the handwritten checklist taped inside the electrical panel, the way he never hesitated to get his hands dirty, even when no one asked or cared. That wasn't just initiative, it was purpose. And Gavin needed to understand it. The next day, he walked into the warehouse before sunset again, this time through the back. He'd brought a small notepad, pretending to take notes on his training, but really he was mapping Louis' movements. How early he arrived, what tools he used, where he went when no one else was looking, and most importantly, what the security cameras didn't see. It wasn't hard to spot the blind spots. Matteo knew them well. He moved through them effortlessly, ducking behind shelves, slipping into the dark maintenance corners between loading zones. The man wasn't hiding because he was doing something wrong. He was hiding because no one had ever cared enough to ask what he was doing right. That night, Gavin stayed even later. He waited until the last worker left, until the warehouse lights dimmed into night mode and the hum of forklifts was replaced by the low buzz of silence. And then he followed. Matteo had slipped into the far west side of the building near the old inventory staging area, mostly unused now. Gavin ducked behind a steel column, peeking around the corner, breath shallow. What he saw stopped him cold. Louis stood in the middle of the abandoned space with a bucket of tools at his feet. He wasn't fixing something this time. He was cleaning. A heavy-duty broom in one hand, a rag in the other, wiping down panels, sweeping behind dusty pallets, pulling broken zip ties off the floor and tossing them into a trash bag he'd brought himself. In one corner, he knelt beside an old fire extinguisher cabinet and opened it slowly, checking the gauge. He took out a pen and noted something in a small logbook, not company issued, his own. Gavin stepped forward just a little, barely breathing. Matteo moved like a man with a mission, calculated, methodical, steady. He didn't cut corners, he didn't rush, and every movement said one thing clearly: this matters to me. Eventually, Gavin took a small step forward, his boots scraping against a pallet. Matteo turned sharply, eyes wide for a half-second before recognition settled. "Daniel?" he said cautiously. Gavin didn't pretend this time. He stepped into the open, hands up, voice calm. "I'm not here to get you in trouble." Louise's shoulders stayed tense. "Then why are you following me?" Gavin paused, then said the truth. "Because I've seen how you work. I've seen what you fix, what you clean, what you protect, and none of it's on your schedule." Matteo looked down, then back up again. "So what, you going to tell management I've been doing extra work off the clock?" "No," Gavin said quietly. "I'm trying to understand why." Matteo hesitated, and then slowly he answered. "My dad worked at the North Haven site 2 years ago. Safety lock failed. Nobody caught it. He slipped on a spill. No one cleaned up. Broke 2 ribs, damaged his back. Couldn't work again. They paid him out and sent him home." Gavin stood still, listening. No one got fired. No one fixed the system. So when I got this job, I figured if I could keep one person from getting hurt, if I could stop one thing from going wrong, maybe I'd sleep better. Louis shrugged like it was nothing. "But it's not about credit. I don't care if they ever notice. I just don't want what happened to him to happen again." Gavin felt a tightness rise in his chest. This wasn't about overachieving. This was about protecting people from pain. And Luis was doing it with tools he bought himself, in hours no one paid him for, while others laughed about broken forklifts and passed the blame. Gavin looked at him, not just as a worker now, but as a man quietly holding together something everyone else had forgotten. Some men speak with their words. Louise spoke with his actions. And they said more than 1,000 company memos ever could. The warehouse felt heavier after that night. Gavin came in the next evening with a new kind of awareness. Every beep of a scanner, every echoing footstep on the concrete, he saw it differently now. The cracks were everywhere. Tools left out, wires dangling near loading bays, forklifts with warning lights ignored, safety procedures written on posters no one read anymore. And yet, while the system sagged under its own neglect, one man had quietly been holding it together with zip ties, handwritten notes, and pure determination. Mateo Cruz. Gavin spotted him near Zone 4, helping a new temp navigate a mislabeled shipment. He guided the guy patiently, correcting him without condescension, then jogged back to his own zone to stay on pace. Always moving, always cleaning up messes that weren't his. Gavin made a decision. During their break, he caught up with Mateo in a quiet corner of the break room, where the overhead light flickered unnoticed by anyone else. Louise sat on a crate eating plain rice from a plastic container. Same as every night, no vending machine snacks, no coffee. Gavin sat across from him. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, voice low. Mateo didn't look up. "You shouldn't have followed me." "I know," Gavin admitted. "But I'm glad I did." Mateo finally raised his eyes. "We've been running this company for 10 years, Gavin said carefully, and I thought I knew what made it work. The systems, the numbers, the reports. But last night I realized we've built an entire culture around speed, not care." Mateo didn't say anything, but his eyes stayed locked on Gavin's. "I'm not here to make it about me," Gavin added. "I just want to understand you. What drives someone to keep showing up early, staying late, fixing things in silence? You could have asked for recognition. You could have reported the problems, but you didn't." Louise shrugged. "I've seen what happens when people ask. HR files it, then forgets it, management shrugs or blames it on someone else. But if I just fix it myself, no one gets hurt and no one has to get blamed." Gavin leaned in slightly. "That's not your burden to carry." Mateo looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred, steady. "I don't see it as a burden," he said. "I see it as my part. Everyone else does theirs. This is mine. I don't need thanks. I just need to know the people on this floor get to go home in one piece." The words hit Gavin hard. This wasn't quiet desperation. It was quiet integrity, the kind of integrity most people talked about in motivational posters, but didn't live. "I want to show you something," Louise said suddenly. Gavin blinked. "What?" "After shift. Stay back." And with that he stood up and went back to work like nothing happened. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Gavin barely paid attention to the boxes he scanned. He was thinking about everything. Louis' story, his father, the safety issues that had gone unreported, the blind spots in their protocol. He thought about how many workers might be slipping through those same cracks without someone like Louise to catch them. When the shift ended, the others filtered out, tired and half asleep. Gavin stayed. Mateo appeared from the shadows near the far hallway, waved him over, and led him past the usual break zone down a maintenance path Gavin hadn't explored yet. Then he stopped in front of a metal door. He pulled out a key. Inside was a small room, not on any map, no label, probably used as storage once. But Mateo had turned it into something else. There were binders on shelves, each labeled by month, each one filled with logs of equipment inspections, informal safety notes, and checklists. On the wall was a hand-drawn map of the facility, marked with red dots, potential hazard zones, areas cameras didn't reach, leaks, loose wires, uneven flooring. It was a safety command center, built by one man alone, in silence. Gavin stepped inside and stared at the details. "You made this?" Mateo nodded. "Started after my first month here. Figured no one else would." Gavin turned slowly, taking it all in. He didn't just uncover a secret. He'd walked into the beating heart of a broken system and found its conscience working overtime. Some companies build systems to track performance, but the best work often happens far outside anything a spreadsheet can measure. Gavin stood in the center of that tiny hidden room for longer than he realized, surrounded by the weight of what Mateo had built. Not just a system, but a safeguard. A wall against everything the official processes had failed to catch. red markers, diagrams, notes written in careful block letters. It was more organized than most of the actual safety department files he'd seen, and it was built in secret, by one man, for everyone else. That realization sat with Gavin like a stone in his chest as he drove back to his hotel in the early hours of the morning. He didn't sleep, he couldn't. He kept picturing the red dots on the warehouse map, the quiet routine, the way Matteo had stepped into the cracks no one else wanted to look at. Not because he was paid to look, because he refused to look away. By noon, Gavin had already called his executive team. No meetings, no memos, just a simple order. Clear my schedule. He booked a flight back to HQ, spent the day reviewing internal safety protocols, then spent the night digging through every HR log attached to Lewis' location. What he found made his jaw clench. There had been reports, minor incidents, misplaced equipment, several near misses, a maintenance backlog 3 months long, notes about understaffed night crews, but nothing escalated. No follow-ups, no corrective action, just hollow digital checkboxes marked resolved. Worse still, no recognition. Louise's name didn't appear in any internal praise or award system, not in peer recognition, not in supervisor reports, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. That afternoon, Gavin returned to the warehouse, but this time as himself. He wore no disguise, no hoodie, no fake badge. He walked through the front doors in a fitted jacket, clean shave, sharp steps, and the room fell quiet. Derek looked up from his tablet, eyes widening. "Mr. Pierce?" Gavin said. "Get everyone on the floor, now." Within 15 minutes, the entire team was gathered near the loading dock. Temps, regulars, supervisors, even the forklift crew. Conversations buzzed with confusion. Some looked nervous, others just curious. Louise stood near the edge of the group, expression unreadable. Gavin stepped forward. "I know most of you don't recognize me," he began, voice calm but full. "I've been working alongside you this past week. You knew me as Daniel." Whispers shot through the crowd. A few heads snapped toward Matteo. One guy mouthed, "What?" without sound. "I came here because something didn't sit right," Gavin continued. "Reports said the numbers were good, but I kept seeing one name pop up in strange ways. Someone staying late, fixing things off the clock, cleaning up when no one asked." He paused. "I followed him. I watched him. And what I saw shocked me." He turned, looking straight at Matteo. This man built an entire safety system in secret. He repaired broken machinery, logged hazards, and did the work of an entire department. Without pay, without recognition, without asking for a thing. Matteo shifted awkwardly under the weight of dozens of stares. "I'm not here just to say thank you," Gavin said. "I'm here to admit that we failed." The room fell dead silent. Our systems were blind. Our culture let effort like Lewis slip through the cracks. And while leadership sat in meetings and signed policies, he did the real work. He protected you, all of you. Someone in the back whispered, "Damn." Derek looked like he wanted to shrink into the wall. Gavin stepped forward. "Starting today, Matteo is being promoted to Senior Safety Coordinator. Not just for this warehouse, for the entire region. His methods will become part of our new standard. And if anyone has a problem with that, take it up with me." A long pause. Then someone clapped. One person, then another, then all at once the floor broke into applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that comes when people realize someone's finally being seen. Luis didn't smile. He didn't bask in it. He just nodded once, because he hadn't done it for this. But now for the first time, the company he quietly guarded from the shadows was finally shining a light in his direction. Recognition doesn't always come with a raise or a title. Sometimes it comes with a shift in how people finally look at you. Matteo didn't say much after the meeting, even as the applause faded and people approached him with hesitant congratulations or sheepish smiles. He stayed quiet, nodding politely, offering a few quiet thank yous. He didn't glow with pride. He didn't break down in emotion. He just stood there, steady as always, like the foundation he'd always been. But Gavin saw something different in his eyes now. Not shock, not pride, relief. For the first time, Matya didn't have to hide. The next morning, Gavin returned to headquarters. He didn't call a board meeting, he called a rebuild. He brought in regional managers, HR directors, safety officers, and operations leads from all 5 warehouses. In the center of the long conference table, he placed a stack of printed copies. Photos of Louis' hand-drawn hazard maps, his daily logs, his private repair notes, and a copy of the maintenance checklist he'd kept folded in his pocket. "This," Gavin said, tapping the papers, "is what leadership missed." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. For months, maybe longer, our systems failed. The people who were supposed to track safety didn't. The supervisors who were supposed to support their teams overlooked the most committed person in the building, not because they meant to, but because our culture made it easy to ignore quiet effort. There was a long silence. A few managers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One cleared his throat and muttered, "We didn't know." Gavin's eyes sharpened. That's exactly the problem. He outlined the changes, personally. First, a formal recognition program, not for the loudest voices or the fastest shifts, but for those who go unseen. Anonymous nominations with the ability for coworkers and even temps to highlight acts of integrity, service, and care. Second, a safety reformation plan, one that included Matteo at the top. Every warehouse would adopt his inspection model, update their camera blind spots, and implement a new system for logging concerns that bypass supervisor approval entirely. Third, a culture audit. Gavin wanted every regional lead to interview employees directly. No surveys, no HR filters. One-on-one, face-to-face. Start listening. And he said, "We don't get to lead if we don't learn." Back at the warehouse, word spread quickly. Some workers were stunned that Matteo had been promoted. Others said, "I'm not even surprised." They'd seen the signs, even if they hadn't fully understood them. The toolbox that never seemed to move, the way wires quietly got fixed, the fact that Matteo always knew where the broken stuff was. Now they knew why. In his new role, Matteo didn't change much. He still wore his sleeves rolled, still arrived early, still checked the fire extinguisher cabinets even when he didn't have to. But something was different. People stopped him in the halls, asked for his input. Managers who once ignored him now waited for his feedback. Workers who barely glanced at him before now nodded when he passed. And most importantly, new employees were told on day one, if you want to know how to do things right, watch Matteo. Gavin returned to visit 2 weeks later. He didn't wear a hoodie this time. No alias, no disguise. He walked in as himself and saw Matteo training 2 junior safety officers in a once-abandoned part of the warehouse that now held fresh paint, a proper inspection station, and a digital screen tracking open safety reports. It wasn't just a cleanup. It was a shift in thinking. The company wasn't just rewarding what Matteo had done, they were learning from it. And that, Gavin thought, was the real win. 2 months later, Gavin returned to the warehouse one final time. Not for a surprise inspection, not undercover, not to give a speech, just to see. The place looked different. The walls had been repainted, yes, but it wasn't just the color. There was new energy in the air, a calm buzz. Workers greeted each other more, took actual breaks, laughed in places that had once echoed with only the sound of machinery. But the biggest change, people started noticing the small things. A temp picking up trash without being asked. A shift lead replacing a broken scanner on her own initiative. An overnight crew who added handwritten notes for the morning team about what still needed attention. No one needed credit. They were just following the lead of someone who had quietly redefined what it meant to care. And in the middle of it all was Matteo. He stood near Dock 5, clipboard in one hand, deep in conversation with a team of trainees, walking them through a new safety protocol he'd helped design from scratch. His sleeves were still rolled, still no nonsense, still steady. Gavin waited until the group dispersed, then approached him with a small smile. "Feels different here," he said. Matteo nodded. "'Tis better." Matteo hesitated, then added, "Becoming." Gavin liked that answer. He handed Matteo a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. No letterhead, no logo, just a simple line. "Thank you for doing the right thing even when no one was watching." And beneath it a key. Matteo raised an eyebrow. "There's an office waiting for you at HQ," Gavin said. "If you want it, Director of Field Safety Operations. I'll understand if you'd rather stay on the floor, but the offer's real." Matteo looked down at the key, turned it over in his hand. "I'll think about it," he said. Gavin nodded. "Good." He started to walk away, but Matteo stopped him. "Why'd you really come back today?" Gavin paused, turned slightly. "To remind myself what leadership looks like." He smiled, then added, "You've got a quiet way of making people better, Matteo. I think you always had it. You just needed a world that finally stopped long enough to notice." Matteo didn't smile wide. He didn't tear up. That wasn't him. But he nodded, and that was enough. As Gavin walked toward the exit, the afternoon light poured through the high windows, casting long beams across the warehouse floor. Dust sparkled in the air. Somewhere nearby, a scanner beeped. A cart rolled across the smooth concrete. Life moved on, but now it moved differently, because of one man, one choice, one moment when someone did the right thing. Not for praise, not for promotion, but because they simply refused to look away.